Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Appreciate you joining me for another week for another episode of this little podcast that we have going on here. Before I get into today's topic, I just want to ask the same favors I do every single week. Make sure you're subscribed or following on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. We are on Apple, Spotify, Google. By making sure that you're subscribed or following along, you'll be notified every time that I drop a new episode, which generally goes out at some point early on a Saturday morning Australian time, and I do really focus on getting out one episode a week on the podcast platforms, on the audio variations. I am a little bit slack with doing the video versions as I am the one that edits and uploads them. And I can go through phases where I'm a bit slack on social media. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's going on with all the podcasts that come out, the best way to do that is to make sure that you're subscribed or following on whatever podcast platform that you're listening to this on. We are on all of them: Apple, Spotify, Google. Go ahead and also give us a 5-star review if you like what I'm doing here. If you find some value out of it, make sure that you're sharing it with your friends. And while you're there, you can follow us on the socials. So at The Unstoppable Dad on Instagram and The Unstoppable Dad Project on Facebook. All right, housekeeping out of the road. Let's get into today's topic. So this week, I'm going to have a bit of a chat go through my thoughts on experience versus knowledge, because it's something that comes up a lot for a lot of different people around actions that they need to take. And I think that they cross over. There's a crossover between experience and knowledge but I think for a lot of people, they feel like if they have the knowledge about something, that they don't necessarily need to experience it. And I actually think it's the other way around. I think that through experience, you gain knowledge about a particular subject. Now, each is important, but I actually feel like experience is more important. And maybe that's because I'm getting into or about to cross over into my 40s now. So maybe I'm gaining a little bit of a different perspective than what I did in my 30s, which I believe to be true. I actually think that the older that I get personally, the more I realize I don't know, the more objective I become about things, the more mature I become about the way I look at particular things. And for me, that's actually pretty exciting, the fact that I'm looking at things through a different lens. And I think everyone goes through that at some point. It's at a different life stage, but experience matters. Like, experience for me is the number one thing. And I think when you don't have the experience, we try and consume as much knowledge as we can in order to make up for that lack of experience. And that can lead into trouble, because then it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Where we know a little bit about a topic and our confidence about that topic can go up. And then as we go into and we actually dive into it, then the longer we stay in whatever that particular topic is, it really highlights how much we don't actually know. So our confidence within that starts to wane. But the fact is, if let's say we're talking about someone who wants to make a change in their life, or someone who wants to do something different in their life, I think you need to go through a phase where you firstly gain the knowledge around that particular topic or that particular change that you're trying to make. But then, in order to gain the experience, you actually need to take action on that knowledge. Because just reading about it and just observing is not going to actually work out whether that's going to be applicable to you or applicable to the circumstance that you want to place that knowledge into, or the action that you want to take. Because if you don't try, you don't know. Like, if we just continue to read things and we continue to consume information and we don't take action on that information, then we never get to experience what's going on. And if you simply think that it won't work, or you simply think that it doesn't apply to you, yet you haven't actually applied it to yourself, then you may be missing out. Like, you might be missing out on something that may change the whole game for you and change the whole game for that circumstance. And I think if you're looking at some new knowledge that you've gained around something that you want to try and you want to implement, like you've really got to hit that for a minimum 3 to 6 months. Only doing it for a week or two and then dismissing it isn't actually going to gain that level of experience, that lived experience that you need in order to confidently say that this is going to work. And it's funny because I look at, and this is going to sound like I'm shitting on a lot of people, and I am to an extent, but if I relate it back to my own experiences, right? Like there's a few stages in my life where I thought because I had a bunch of knowledge, I was okay to do and coach a particular thing. But when I actually got into it, I realized that because I didn't have enough experience around the topic, I didn't really have that. And there's two big times that highlights for me. No, the first time was when I was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, and I'd been training jiu-jitsu for a couple of years. I had some people, some black belts that I trained with approach me to do some strength and conditioning for them. And at this stage, I had almost 10 years of strength and conditioning experience, right? Which was fine. And I thought because I had a bunch of strength and conditioning knowledge, I would have the absolute, and a little bit of jiu-jitsu knowledge, I would have the absolute magic program for what was required for them, for their strength and conditioning. Now, getting into actually training them, I realized that I probably wasn't giving them the appropriate program for what they needed as well as what they wanted, because I didn't have the appropriate experience around jiu-jitsu. I hadn't gone deep enough into that journey to understand the stage that they were at, and I hadn't experienced that for myself. And I look at that now, almost 4 years removed from that particular situation, and go, you know what? That was an experience problem for me. That wasn't a knowledge problem. Because now I look at the level of knowledge I had then in that particular, and I had the knowledge to do that, but I didn't have the experience around the particular application. And now I look at it and would I do things differently? There's a little bit that I would do differently. There's not a whole lot because the knowledge was there, but with the extra experience I now have around that, there are things that I would have done differently that would change the dynamic of that completely. And that's, for me, the difference between knowledge and experience. And the only way you get experience is live time. It's the same as being a dad, right? I've seen a little bit on, and this is where it's gonna sound like I'm shitting on a few people, and I am, but I've seen on Facebook like quite a few dad coaches who they have like newborn babies, right? Like kids under 6 months old. And they feel like they need to go and coach other dads, which is great. I think the more good resources out there for dads and men, the better. But and when your kid's under 6 months old, as a dad, other than the sleep deprivation, you're not, for most people, you're not doing a whole bunch, right? You're helping your wife and you're doing that, but there's a whole bunch of things around being a parent that I don't know about the experience of other fathers on here, and everyone's experience is different. So I probably shouldn't. I'm not saying this to kind of point out to anybody, but for me, for that first kind of 6 months, you almost feel like you're not doing anything, right? Because the child's so dependent on a mother. And yes, like there are a lot of mental battles you have to go through because at that point, because you aren't doing anything and you don't feel like you're active in the child's life, you don't. Like there's a whole bunch of mental stuff that I personally had to overcome, and I know a lot of other dads do. But you need to live that experience, right? The knowledge that it's going to happen to you is one thing, but living that experience is another, especially if you want to help other men through that stage, because you can't really tell them what's going to happen on the other side if you haven't been through it. And being a dad, it's a journey. There's no handbook for it. You can't give anybody an exact piece of advice or knowledge around what is going to happen to them because their experience is going to be unique. But if you are talking to somebody about it and trying to impart some knowledge or some advice, if you haven't lived that phase and come out the back end of it, it's a very hard thing to do. And the knowledge of what may happen is one thing, but the experience is the other. And these are two times in my life where, so say for example, the Dad Project started almost 4 or 5 years ago now. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And I probably started that and tried to launch the Dad program far too early because I hadn't experienced a longer spectrum of being a father. Now, my kids aren't that old. They're only 7 and 4. And I appreciate that if people have kids that are older than mine, there's going to be different stages that they've gone through. But I've at least been through it for longer than like a 3 or 6 month period to have some ups and downs in that situation. And I say ups and downs because sometimes we go through downs and we can't see that it's going to get to an up because we're so stuck in that moment. And what it takes is it actually takes the experience of you going through that down portion of your life to know that you're going to come out the back end of that. And this is the thing. For me, this is the big thing between knowledge and experience. And why experience is so important and why it's so important to actually get in there, get in the trenches and do some stuff and learn through experience. And something for me that I've actually really been highlighting on in my own life, because I have been so guilty of just over the last, not so much the last couple of years, but prior to that, I went through a phase where I would try and get all the knowledge possible, right? But I would take action on none of it. And I would almost get overwhelmed with the amount of things I had to do. I would start to feel frustrated with myself. I would start to become anxious about the amount of stuff that I've done. But I would be so knowledgeable about a particular topic, but I had no experience with it. And what I found was when I started to, and then from the point of view of a coach, because I hadn't actually applied it and I hadn't actually gained any experience, whether it was experience in my own life or experience coaching other people, I'd feel like a little bit of a fraud. I wouldn't feel very confident about it. I wouldn't feel like I was actually able to help anybody. I would just feel really really bad about that particular thing. Whereas when I switched that to, yes, still trying to seek new knowledge, but then when I gain that new knowledge, applying it and experiencing that made a massive shift. And taking action tends to quiet the mind for me and get rid of that negative self-talk. So it doesn't, because I'm actually feel like I'm moving things forward because I'm working on something, I'm applying that knowledge, I'm experiencing it, I'm not experiencing as many negative emotions. And you just don't know what you don't know, right? Like you can only gain so much knowledge from books, and then you work out what can go wrong from there, and then you adjust, and then you get back on track, and then you take more action. And that is how you build confidence around something. A lot of people that I talk to, a lot of men that I talk to, they lack confidence. They lack confidence around their body, their relationship, whatever the case might be, but they're not actually doing anything. They have all this knowledge pent up in their head from all this information they've consumed, but they haven't done anything with it. They haven't experienced it. And when you start to experience things, what I've noticed is you build confidence, and not an arrogance, but a confidence around, hey, like I can do this. I can start to move this thing forward. I'm seeing improvements in what I'm doing. And that confidence comes down from not only experiencing it, but also being true to your word. Because I think there's a part of gaining knowledge where you tell yourself, oh, I'm going to go and do that. And if you don't go and do that, it almost creates this vacuum within yourself where you feel like you're not good enough because you haven't taken any action on the things that you've told yourself or you've told other people that you were going to do. And that, for me, is why experience is so important, is because you need to take action on the knowledge that you gain to gain confidence within that particular subject, to gain real-world experience, because real-world experience in today's day and age where information is so readily accessible, I think is actually something that is severely lacking in a lot of people. And then by applying that and taking action and doing it and gaining confidence, you're being true to your word, you're stacking the little wins over and over and over again. And then that's where the change happens. And not looking for the shortcuts, not looking for that little piece of knowledge that you want to change everything, that really simple thing to change everything. Because this is, again, it's something that I know I've been guilty of, where one of the reasons I will consume knowledge is because I'll feel like I'm in such a deep hole that I just need, and I've told myself in the past, I just need one thing, and that one thing will change everything. Like it's going to be something simple. And it never is. And the further I go down that knowledge path of trying to get more knowledge on something and not actually applying any of it, the worse it can get mentally. Whereas I've realized that if I just take action and build a little bit of confidence and then continually strive to get it done day in, day out, build those little wins, and then things will go wrong. And that's also going to help you build resilience. It's going to help you build extra knowledge on top of it, because something's going to go wrong. So then you have to go and search for knowledge or a way out, or go and consult somebody, a coach, like, hey, I've done this, but you're getting really precise knowledge, really precise action around that particular set of circumstance for you. So you know the next action you take isn't 15 different things that you've read on the internet. It's one thing for you that you go, all right, I'm going to go to here next. And then I can continue to build that experience, continue to stack those little wins. Then we get another roadblock. We try and work through it. We can't quite work through it. We change that course just a little bit, builds a little bit of resilience, and builds even more confidence when we've had to work through it and things start to work on the back end. But it's not a quick fix, and nothing ever is. An experience for me right now, from the perspective that I've been sitting on for the last couple of years, experience trumps everything. Knowledge is important, but taking the time to put in the work around that knowledge you've gained is also so important, because a lot of people I talk to, myself included, spend so much time consuming all this extra knowledge but not actually doing anything with it. And there's no magic, there's no shortcut, there's no quick fix. You just have to do the work. And that's it. That's experience versus knowledge. Let me know if this is something that you've battled with in the past, because I think it is something that goes unspoken for a lot of people, where some people are almost self-development junkies. Again, I've been guilty of it. There's no shame in it. But, you get in a spot where you're not quite sure how to get out of, and the answer to it is to try and consume knowledge, but then that spot feels like it gets worse and worse and worse, and you're getting in deeper and deeper and deeper, and what you start looking for is you start looking for quick fixes. You start looking for ways to get out of here that are going to be easy because you just want a little win. But the way you get that little win is actually to take some action on the hard stuff. So if this is something you've struggled with, you can always book in for a chat to talk to me. I'm here to help, here to hopefully give you some really precise action that you can take to get you moving forward. If you want some help reclaiming that strength and athleticism as well, that's my jam. That's what I'm good at. So I'm here to help. I'm here to get you back on track with that. So thanks very much for listening. Let me know if you got some value out of this podcast. Let me know if it's something that you have struggled with in the past or even struggling with now. Have a great week, and I will talk to you next week. Goodbye.